So, good good morning. My name is Kashish Dhoka and I'm a core committee member of IIT VIT. I'm pleased to see the enthusiasm of the audience and would like to welcome you all to the workshop of quantum series, Neuronetics. We are glad to introduce our speaker for today's workshop, Ms. Kartika Kamath. She completed her formal education at Veer Mata Jijabai Technological Institute VJTI and currently works as a consultant and a researcher at Fractal Analytics. She is one of the early members of the Fractal Cerebral team, building a new capability at the intersection of neuroscience and artificial intelligence. Her current research is focused on unraveling the final seconds of decision making of a consumer by combining the fields of neuroscience, digital marketing, and artificial intelligence. Ma'am, we're grateful to have you today. The platform is all yours.
Thank you so much, Kashish, for your kind words. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you all today and talk about my learnings in this field of neuroscience and AI and the intersection of this field. And clearly, in these recent years, this field has gained a lot of attention, and there's so many exciting work and research happening in this field. So, a bit of that I'll share with you all today. And I'll actually share my screen right now. Let me just do that quickly. Let me know if you can see my screen. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Great. So yeah, like I was saying, I will be talking about this field of neuroscience and AI today, and I'll share my learnings. And it's like we are right now living in this exciting times where we are witnessing this field evolve. So let's get started. Um, I generally like to start with this analogy where I would like to say that this field of neuroscience is in its Faraday stage. What I mean by Faraday stage is that that was a time where experiments were performed to study the behavior of magnets for the first time. Even when magnet was something that was being used for ages before, like in compass and so on, and the connection between magnetism and electricity was also established by the moving magnet and coil of wire experiment. So all of this was very qualitative at that stage. Moving on to the next stage, that was Maxwell stage, and it was much later that Maxwell formalized it and came up with the electromagnetic wave equation that formed the basis of modern physics. So the field of neuroscience is yet to see its Maxwell stage. So isn't it exciting to be in the stage of neuroscience where we get to unravel all the mysteries just to understand our own brain? Right, that's why I'm really excited about this field, and that's why I'm trying my best to research and collaborate and do something and inspire others also to join this field. I'll first quickly give you a feel of the agenda today. Like, what I'm going to do is first I'll talk about what is neuroscience from very basic, very simple terms. And that's also a place where I'll also share my journey in this field, how I got started, what is the kind of project I did, all of that. From there, I'll move on to machine intelligence, which is also known as artificial intelligence. And from there, we'll have a good comparison between digital computing and neural computing, because we need to know what is that brain can do better, and what is that humans can, or the AI can do better, and what is that they can learn from each other, right? So after that, we will jump into this question of how has neuroscience inspired AI. And here is where I will take few examples from the current AI algorithms that we've been aware of or we are using, and tell you how it's been inspired from the concepts from neuroscience at an algorithmic level. And And after that, I will jump into this topic of computational neuroscience, which is one of the discipline of the neuroscience as a whole. And that's where I'll talk about what is computational neuroscience, what are researchers really doing in this field, and it's also a place where I'll introduce you to different things that are happening in the industry. What are the different kind of computational neuroscience models that they are using in these different industries? And finally, I will leave you all with something that you can do today if you're interested to enter this field at the intersection of neuroscience and AI. So I'll share some resources at that point. So let's get started. This 3 pound organ that we have with billions of neurons constantly firing in it allows us to do multitude of things throughout the day. And this has created this whole field of neuroscience. Um, so this neuroscience has traditionally been a subdivision of biology, focusing on the brain and its impact on behavior and cognitive functions. It includes both the normal functioning of the nervous system as well as what happens to the nervous system when people have neurological, psychiatric, or any neurodevelopmental disorders. So, all of this is the traditional neuroscience. In fact, studying a brain with some sort of disorder, it's just emphasizing on the disorder part right now. Um, so if we study a brain with some sort of a disorder, that's how we actually can understand the normal functioning of the brain, and that's the approach that neuroscientists also generally take. Why I'm saying so is that if there's something going wrong, then only you can try to debug it and try to understand, oh, this is why it must be going wrong or something like that. So in that process, you get to know the actual functioning of the brain. If it's working all nicely, smoothly, there's no entry point for you to really investigate how the brain really works. And this whole concept has been really well explained in this book, Phantoms in the Brain. This is actually one of the first books that I read when I also got interest in this field. And I would highly recommend you all to grab this book and read it for yourself. And in fact, actually, I was so inspired by this book that I also made a YouTube summary of this video, of this book, like a book summary. So you can also go and check it out if you don't have time to read this book. So, coming back to neuroscience, now these days, neuroscience is an interdisciplinary science that interacts closely with other disciplines. It's just not the traditional biology neuroscience anymore right now. It's a discipline that has a lot of things in it, like such as mathematics, linguistics, engineering, computer science, chemistry, philosophy, psychology, and medicine. So when you're, what I'm trying to say here is that whatever background you are coming from or you're interested in, you can always transition into neuroscience. There's always a way you can get into neuroscience with whatever relevant experience you have had in the past. So neuroscientists are involved in a much wider scope of fields today than before. They study the cellular, functional, evolutionary, computational, molecular, and medical aspects of nervous system. So modern neuroscience, this is the modern neuroscience, and it has multiple disciplines within it. And like there are more than 15 disciplines. There are a few which I've mentioned on the slide here, like for example, affective neuroscience, which is basically trying to understand how the neurons behave in relation to emotions. And that's more like the research here is generally carried out on laboratory animals. And then there is behavioral neuroscience, where the study of the biological basis of behavior is done looking at how the brain affects behavior. There's clinical neuroscience, where it looks at the disorders of the nervous system, while psychiatry, for example, looks at the disorder of the mind. Cognitive neuroscience, which is also very exciting, it's one of my favorites, where they study the higher cognitive functions that exist in humans and their underlying neural bases. There's two broad directions here. One is a behavioral and experimental, and the other is a computational or modeling. And the aim being to understand the nature of cognition from a neural point of view. There's computational neuroscience, which is another favorite of mine, where they are attempting to understand how brains compute using computers to simulate and model brain functions and applying techniques from mathematics, physics, and other computational fields to study brain function. In fact, you know what? The lot of researchers that I've interacted with in this field of computational neuroscience, A lot of them are coming from a background of physics. So coming from a physics background, they're jumping into this field of computational neuroscience because there's a lot of things coming from physics fundamentals in this field as well. And then there is neuroengineering, which is using engineering techniques to better understand, replace, repair, or improve neural systems. Like that, there are much more. Like there is neuroimaging, neuroinformatics, systems neuroscience, neurolinguistics, so many more. Um, I'll quickly give you Neurobiology 101. So here you can see on the screen neuron, and a neuron is a fundamental, structural, and functional unit of the brain. These are discrete cells where information flows from the dendrites, these dendrites, to the axon and via the cell body. The cell body is also called the soma. And there are some exceptions where there is a connection between dendrite and directly, but that there are exceptions. So let's just park that thought for now. Generally, what happens is the connection is between dendrite. Information flows from dendrite to axon, and the connection between two neurons, the junction between that junction is called the synapse, where one axon of this particular neuron is connected to the dendrite of the other neuron, and that junction is called synapse. Now this synapse can be of two types: electrical synapse and chemical synapse. um, Talking about chemical synapse, there are neurotransmitters in our brain which activate these synapses or make these connections. Now, these neurotransmitters, for example, we are all like, there's this dopamine, which we all know, right? So, that is a type of a neurotransmitter. There are other neurotransmitters like oxytocin, there's GABA, and other things as well. So, they are used and that forms the basis of learning or building memory. So these synapses, these chemical synapses, are actually forming the basis for the whole learning and memory in our brain. While the electrical synapse, I'm not talking a lot about it, but that is generally a very fast connection and it is used in, reflex actions and all of that. Um, okay, I forgot to click and show you this synapse. So here you can see the junction. This is the synapse here. And you can see the neurotransmitters get released over here. So now I'll quickly talk about my journey. So, well, my journey into the brain began with a tool. Wait for it. I'll show you the image of the tool also. That got me excited. But the story goes like this: I have always been intrigued by biology and the way evolution has shaped the nature around us. At the same time, I love computers too, and the whole idea of developing algorithms to perform a variety of tasks. So I decided I wanted to work at the intersection of these two fields. This is why I spent some time in the biomedical lab of my college when I was doing my engineering. And over there, I found this particular tool. It's actually a EEG headset. EEG is electroencephalography. So that measures the brain activity. And this is a cap, like very easy to wear kind of a headset. And you can just wear it and you can directly see your brain activities on the computer screen. And this is actually connected via Bluetooth. So you can directly see it. It was very easy to use, and that got me really excited because that was the first time I'm actually seeing some tool through which I can see what my brain is really doing inside, like something like that. Otherwise you can't, there's no way you can see what's happening inside, right? So that got me really excited, and I with my teammates we started working on a project. So of course we lacked the domain expertise. We had no idea about how brain functions, how we just knew this, there's this tool, but we didn't even know the details of this tool. Like there are many electrodes, how do you place these electrodes, how do you interpret the readings from these electrodes, and all of that. So we had to go to a hospital, talk to neuroscientists, and we learned a lot from them, and also read a lot of books and papers at that point, as well as there's a crucial step here when you're doing an experiment with EEG and analyzing EEG data and all of that. If you're also involved in collecting the EEG data yourself, then you need to design that experiment to collect that data efficiently, right? So that's very important because EEG is a very, very noise sensitive data. Even a small eye blink or muscle movement or something is captured like a very distinct spike in the output of this EEG readings that you see, and that will disturb the entire readings that you really are focusing on. So you need to have a very well designed experiment, standardize it, and you need to be in an isolated room where other noise just don't affect your readings. So that's very important. So this is one tool, which is EEG, which is what I worked with. But there are other tools as well. Like, for example, this that you see is an fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging, or functional MRI, which measures the brain activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow. Now, this technique relies on the fact that cerebral blood flow and neuronal activation are coupled. So, what I mean by that is when an area of the brain is in use, that is, the neurons over there are spiking and are activated, then blood flow to that particular region also increases, which is what is captured in this particular tool. There is this other tool called MEG, which is something similar to EEG. It's called magnetoencephalography. EEG is electroencephalography. So, like, EEG is better able to measure current sources that are perpendicular to the cortical surface, whereas this MEG is more accurately, it more accurately measures current sources that are parallel to the cortical surface. And then there are other scanners as well, like there's PET scanner, positron emission tomography, that scanner. Then there is so PET scanners are basically used for detecting cancerous tissues and so on. But I would like to emphasize on these two things, which is fMRI and the EEG. Now, EEG and fMRI are the most adopted neuroscientific techniques among researchers. There are limitations and advantages for both of these. EEG has a high temporal resolution, like in milliseconds, whereas fMRI is having a temporal resolution of just seconds. So and EEG very clearly is very accessible, easy to use, and it's not bulky as the other instruments. It's cheaper also, very accessible to researchers. Like, I wouldn't say it's very cheap that you can have it at your home, but labs can afford it for sure. So that's there. And but if the experiment is more concerned with structural and the functional details and the deep brain areas, in that case, fMRI is more useful than EEG, because EEG can only measure the activity at the cortical level. fMRI can whereas see the activities that are going on in the deep brain areas. I'll quickly tell you what I mean by cortical and deep brain. So in this image that you see, this the outermost area, like this part, is all cortical region. Inside the brain, this entire cortical region, there is this deep brain things, like and they're very important things, like hippocampus, which is actually the memory unit. There is where the memory is stored, and all the other things, thalamus and all of that, resides in the deep brain area. So EEG cannot reach that part of the brain and capture activity. It just captures activity from the cortex. Um, so, however, both EEG and fMRI, the signals are averages of the approximate activity of a large group of neurons, and so the exact timing and location of responses can be difficult to discern. So, it's always an approximation that we are dealing with when we are using these tools to understand the brain. Coming back to my project, this is the data that we got from the EEG headset. Now we have the data, but how do we make sense of it? Here is where computers help us. Now, like things like visualizing, pre-processing data, all of this, we depend on computers for doing all of these tasks. And scientists rely on various software to perform all these computations. In my own project, we did use MATLAB, we used Python, we used NOBio.
Okay, so we're having some internet issues from the speaker's side. So give us some time. We'll be back. So because of the internet issue, there will be a slight delay. So we apologize for the inconvenience caused. We'll be back soon. Hope you all are enjoying this YouTube live, and we'll be back really soon.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we have resolved our issue and we'll be back now. Thank you for waiting. We apologize for the inconvenience caused.
Hello, everyone. I am so sorry. Please let me know where did you stop your where did I stop? What was the last thing that you heard from me? Kashish, can you let me know?
Yeah, give me a minute.
Yeah, sure. I'll
Yeah,
actually share my screen so you can also let me know if that is
yeah,
that
just
way.
share your screen. That would be easier.
Yeah, let me do that. Okay, just a minute. I lost my PPT as well. There's something happening here. So sorry for the inconvenience. Just bear with me for a minute. All right.
Okay,
Got
just
the
let
PPT
me
up.
know. You were actually talking about your project,
Oh, okay, okay. So, okay, I'll start from there.
the
Let me.
modern neuroscience people.
Hmm.
That slide, yeah, that part of the slide.
All right. Uh,
Then wait. You were talking about your journey, my journey.
okay, so I'll. Is the screen visible now?
Um, yeah, it is visible.
Okay. Let me go to the slide, my journey, and I'll just start this my journey. Okay, we are back. Hopefully, everything is all right now, right?
Yeah, it's perfect. You can start.
Great. Okay, so the previous slide was this neurobiology one-on-one. I hope yeah, here I just told you about what is a neuron and what is a synapse. Now I am talking to you about my journey. So my journey into the brain began with a tool, and you can see this is a tool, which is the EEG tool. And so what happened was when I saw this particular headset, which is like simple cap in my biomedical lab when I was a student, I got so excited because that was the first time I could do something and see what is happening in my brain outside in a computer, right? Otherwise, there's just there sitting inside. I don't know what's happening, but I'm very curious about what's happening inside. So this gave me this a way to do that or satisfy my curiosity in some extent. So what this particular tool did was you could just wear it, and it will capture your brain activities, and you can see that on your computer screen, and it is Bluetooth connected. So that was very easy to use. And what we did was because this is so exciting that I, with my teammates, we went and visited a hospital, talked to neuroscientists to understand and gain that domain expertise because that was something we lacked. So we wanted to know how to really use this tool and what can we do with this and so many things. Like we just wanted to know so much from them, and we went and talked directly to the neuroscientist at the hospital. After that, what we realized is when we start the project, if the data collection, that is recording EEG activities, is a part of your project, that you're collecting the data yourself, then there's something very important. You need to carefully design that experiment for data collection. And for that, why I'm saying so is because EEG is a very noise sensitive data. And you can, this like even an eye blink or a little muscle movement or something gets captured as a immediate, like a spike on the EEG reading, and that will interfere with the actual readings that you're concerned with in your experiment. And even like even the noise around and all really affects the reading, so you need to be in an isolated room to perform the experiment and all of that. So, but still, it's very easy to use at the end of the day. There are just few limitations, but if you do it properly, you are able to capture the EEG readings. But after the reading that you've got, it's, I won't say it's a very clean reading. You need to do a lot of pre-processing in it. So this one particular tool, EEG tool, like that, there are other tools as well. There is this fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance imaging, or functional MRI, which measures brain activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow. This technique relies on the fact that cerebral blood flow and neuronal activation are coupled. When an area of the brain is in use, blood flow to that region also increases. So this is the fundamental on which this particular tool has been developed. There is this other thing called MEG, which is magnetoencephalography, and EEG is electroencephalography. So it's similar, but EEG is better able to measure current sources that are perpendicular to the cortical surface, while MEG more accurately measures current sources that are parallel to the cortical surface. Then there are other scanners as well, like PET scanner, and that is used for detecting cancerous tissues and so on. So, but I will focus mainly on these two, which is fMRI and EEG. And because EEG and fMRI are the most adopted neuroscientific techniques among researchers, there are limitations and advantages for both of these. EEG has a high temporal resolution, which is like in milliseconds, whereas fMRI has just in seconds. Mm, and then there is EEG, which is way cheaper and very accessible. Right, you can clearly see it's just a cap that you have to wear, right? And it's when I say cheaper, it's not that cheap that you can have it at your own home, but researchers can have it in their lab very easily. And but the other instruments that you see are very bulky, right? So it's not that easy to use or accessible, and you need a lot of expertise also. You can't just go and do some experiment with fMRI and so on. So but if the experiment is more concerned with structural and functional details and the deep brain areas, then fMRI is more useful than EEG, because EEG can only measure the activity from the cortical areas, like corticals. What I mean by that is that um, here you can see this top, this part, the outermost layer, that is the cortical area, and there are other important elements in our brain which resides inside, like in deep brain area, like hippocampus, which is concerned with the memory and all of that. So that's there in the deep brain area. However, for both EEG and fMRI, one thing to note is that signals are averages of the approximate activity of a large group of neurons, and so the exact timing and location of responses can be difficult to discern. So we just need to be aware that when we are dealing with these tools and reading the data, we are actually dealing with approximated values and not the exact values. Going back to my project, that EEG headset, from that we were capturing these kind of data. So this data looks something like this. That headset had eight, so you can see eight different channels, eight different readings over here. Now the question is, we have this data, but how to make sense of it? So here is where computers help us. From visualizing to pre-processing the data, scientists rely on various software to perform all these computations. In my own project, we did use MATLAB for pre-processing this data. We had used even Python for a little bit of computations. We also had used the EnoBio software. So this EEG headset was from this brand called EnoBio. They had their own software to visualize the data and do a little bit of pre-processing and all of that. So we use that software as well. And like we have PDF readers, right? There is something called EDF reader, which helps you read the EEG data. So all these different kind of things we had used in our project. And ultimately, AI techniques are then applied to this data to analyze, draw patterns from it, and train some models and so on. So here is where you can see how AI really helps the field of neuroscience and makes our life easier, because this data in itself is so difficult to understand, but you can do it well with the computational power. So, where I'll introduce this machine intelligence. So, let's talk about that now. AI, with its ability to identify patterns in large complex data sets, has seen remarkable successes in the past decade. Artificial neural networks that are analogous to the networks of neurons that comprise the brain have given computers the ability to distinguish an image of a cat from one of a dog, or spot pedestrians with enough accuracy to direct a self-driving car, and so many things that we are all aware of. We're seeing every day the kind of things that AI is able to achieve, right? Um, so, what's happening now is that cognitive science is beginning to benefit from the power of AI, both as a model for developing and testing ideas about how the brain performs computations, and as a tool for processing the complex data sets that researchers produce. So researchers believe that this technology is coming to a full circle and being applied back to understanding the brain. Like initially, we took inspiration from the brain to understand or develop the ANNs, artificial neural network, or other AI algorithms, and now we are using this very system that we developed to better understand the brain. And it is like if you can train such a system, it can produce a pattern of neural activity that resembles a pattern that is recorded from the brain. So when you're able to replicate the brain activities from this model that you can develop, then what scientists can do is they can examine how the system generates its output and then make inference from about how the brain does the same thing. So it also solves ethical issues. You don't have to do the experiments again and again on the brain. You have the model that you've built, which you have, like you've trained this model on the data from the brain, and it has now learned how to reproduce that particular pattern, and you can do other experiments on this particular model that you have created. Now let me quickly compare these two things, like human brain, the neural computing, and the computer, which is the digital computing. Device count in the brain is like it has 10 to the power 11 neurons with 10 to the power 4 connections, whereas in computers there are 10 to the power 10 transistors with sparse connectivity. The speed for brain is like 100 microseconds, and for digital computing it's 100 picosecond clock, and it's actually even more increasing. So clearly the digital computing or computers are a win over here. Computing paradigm for the brain is parallel computation and adaptive learning. What I mean by adaptive learning is that the brains, like the neurons in the brain, are not connected very, by some rules or something. It learns the connections as and when you do some particular task or you learn new things. So we are live wired. Whereas digital computers, this computing or the computers, they are hardwired. There's fixed connection in it. And the capabilities for brain is better at ill posed problems like speech, vision, and for computers we clearly know it's good at math, symbol processing, and all the computational things that the computers are actually great at. um, so I'll quickly see if everything is all right on the screen, right? Okay, and if you have any questions, keep tapping on the chat window. I will see over here and take the questions towards the end. Okay. So now let me come and talk to you about neuroscience inspired AI. So at the very start, AI was intertwined with neuroscience and psychology. In fact, did you know Geoffrey Hinton, who is one of the godfathers of AI, earned his bachelor's in what? He earned his bachelor's in experimental psychology. So he's coming from that background. And after that, he transitioned into AI. So you can see how these two fields are very much interlinked, right? You need to go back to neuroscience, understand how different things work in that, in order to make better AI algorithms. However, more recently, the interaction between these two fields as in neuroscience and AI, has become much less commonplace, as both these subjects have grown enormously in complexity and disciplinary boundaries have solidified in between these two fields. So, actually, I came across this particular paper. It's called Neuroscience Inspired Artificial Intelligence. It's actually written by folks from DeepMind itself, Demis Hassabis, who is the CEO and co-founder of DeepMind. It's a really good paper. Find this paper, have a read, because it clearly tells you the past, present, and future of these two fields, how neuroscience has inspired AI, and also talks about how AI is also helping advance neuroscience research and all of that. So, what I'll do is I'll take a few examples where you can see clearly how neuroscience has inspired AI. You might be aware of the AI algorithms. Like the first one I'll take is the convolutional neural network, or CNN. The name convolutional neural network refers to a class of deep learning algorithms that were initially developed in 1980s, and that was inspired by this experiment which was done by Hubble and Wiesel about the cat's visual cortex. So in 1962, this experiment was performed, and they actually won Nobel Prize for that. What they noticed was that the single neurons in cats' neural cortex fired when specific regions of the visual field were stimulated. Like you can see on the screen, you can from this visual field, only this black color thing, which is actually a light bar. So when that was on, that particular place, light was on, the neurons corresponding to that particular visual field in the brain area were excited, and from the electrodes they were able to capture those readings. So they call these neurons receptive fields, and notice that their neighbor cells had similar or partially overlapping behaviors. So in 1968, Hubble and Wiesel identified two types of visual cells, namely simple cells, which fire when specifically oriented edges are recognized in the receptive field, and complex cells, which have larger receptive fields. And this, like, so basically what they did, like you can see on the screen in that particular TV, they did different patterns or different orientations of this light bar, and the cat was observing, and they were reading the from the electrode directly from the brain, and they saw at different orientations and different width on different light or patterns, different sort of brain neurons were actually getting activated. So it's sort of telling that there are dedicated neurons for understanding some particular orientation or edges and all of that. So the neurologists combined these two types of cell, which is a simple cell and complex cell, in a cascading model for pattern recognition. And that's the story of computational neuroscience. Like in 1980, a Japanese researcher, he wrote this thing called neocognitron, and in which he proposed a neural network to recognize image patterns by relying on two types of layers, which is the convolutional and the other is the downsampling layer, something equivalent to how we observed in the brain as well from the cat's visual cortex. So, in his proposal, the convolutional layers use receptive fields, that is, weighted tensors, to filter patches of the input, while the downsampling layers use receptive fields to calculate the average of the patches. Let me explain that a little bit more here. On this image, you can see that there's a car. Now, the first convolutional layer, it will try to, maybe it's like a filter. So it maybe is trying to capture the edges or some particular orientation in this particular image. So that is being captured. This is averaged using a downsampling or a pooling layer. So there is average pooling or this max pooling. So basically, it's just capturing the relevant information, or it's reducing the this image, or it's basically dimensionality reduction is happening over there. So so Downsampling layers have a role of generalizing what identified by the convolutional layers, allowing the recognition of complex patterns, even when they are slightly different, shifted, rotated, etc. So this was how it started, and then much like later, Jan LeCun, he came and he developed this backpropagation algorithm, which helped to learn, make these algorithms learn by themselves, like what the weights of these convolutional layers should be and things like that. So learning came into picture after the introduction of backpropagation algorithm, and then now there's this ImageNet competition where people build different, like improve on the current algorithms of image recognition. So but all of this started from the Hubble and Weasel experiment, from the visual cortex of cat. So same way, there is a story for reinforcement learning as well. In reinforcement learning, we have an agent such as rat interacting with an environment such as a maze. Now, the agent at any point in time can be in a state. For example, it can in a particular given state, like it can be something like a particular location of rat in the maze, and that agent may get a reward at any point in time, and it can be a positive or a negative reward. And the positive reward might look something like amount of food that a rat gets in a particular location in a maze, or it could represent a particularly nasty encounter with the cat in some location in the maze, so that can be like a negative reward. So now the problem facing the agent, or the rat in this case, is selecting the best actions that will maximize the total predicted future reward. That is basically predicting the future reward. That is very crucial in this reinforcement learning. If he is able to predict that, the action that he takes is going to be most optimal. I mean, his actions are going to be in a way that the outcome of the prediction that he takes, like, okay, if I do this particular action, maybe I'll get a reward in future. So it's guided by that. Now, and this is the problem of reinforcement learning. Um, so how the story of reinforcement learning began is way back again from this particular experiment that Pavlov did with dogs. Now, these are the classical conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning experiments. So, what did Pavlov do? Well, he rang a bell and followed the ringing of the bell with some food reward for the dog. And he repeated this association of bell followed by food reward many, many times. And here's what he observed. He observed that every time he rang the bell, the dog began to salivate. So, bell is not a food, right? But still, ring of the bell triggered his salivation. So, you can conclude that the conditioned stimulus, which in this case is the bell, predicts the future reward, which is the food. I'll take a pause here, see the chat window if everything is all right. All right. Okay, so let me get back to my presentation. Now, let me talk about this whole Pavlovian experiment that we just saw in terms of graph. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Let us see this in this graph that so at time step 100 is when the bell is ringing, and at time step 200 is when the dog gets the reward. So now let's look at the situation before and after learning. In this case, the stimulus and the reward, there is no difference before and after learning. You can see before also and after for both stimulus and reward is the same pattern, because at time step t equal to 100 there is a bell, which is a stimulus, and at time t equal to 200 there is a reward, that is a food. Let's talk about prediction. Here you can see that before learning there is no prediction at all. It's absolute zero. The dog does not know what's going to happen. It's absolute zero. But after prediction, after it has learned from many trials that, after rings, there is a food that he can expect. So as soon as the bell rings, he starts the prediction. So you can see there's a rise in prediction over here, and that goes down when the reward is met. And when we talk about prediction error, we can see that that at t equal to 200, before it had learned this particular conditioning, was that at t equal to 200, there's a prediction error. That is nothing but the reward itself. But when it has learned at t equal to 200, that is when the reward is provided, there is no prediction error at all. Whereas the prediction error has shifted to t equal to 100 now, because now it's trying to predict this bell ringing. So in our brain also, this particular prediction error thing is something equivalent to what a dopamine does. It's the neurotransmitter in our brain that sort of does this equivalent thing of prediction, finding the prediction error, reward prediction error. Now we talked about CNN and we talked about reinforcement learning, and we saw how neuroscience has inspired these two areas of AI algorithms. Similarly, there are more such examples where the algorithms in our brain has inspired a development in the AI algorithm. Like, to give you one or two more examples, it has come to our knowledge that the brain does not process the entire visual image, like every pixel in it, with equal priority. Rather, it has selective attention and finds objects to focus or prioritize in our visual field. And this idea of attention has been used to develop CNN algorithms to perform complex object classification tasks in the presence of clutter, where it can ignore the irrelevant objects in the image. Then there's other thing called working memory. So working memory is basically the limited memory that you have when you're doing some task. It's not the long term memory, it's just the immediate memory that you might just need to do that particular task. So that is working memory, and that concept has been used in building these algorithms, recurrent neural algorithms, the LSTMs, and all of that. So there's also research on one shot learning, zero shot learning, which we humans are very good at, and AI algorithms still reaching that stage. So it is believed that the quest to develop AI will ultimately also lead to a better understanding of our own minds and thought processes. Distilling intelligence into an algorithmic construct and comparing it to human brain might yield insights into some of the deepest and the most enduring mysteries of the mind, such as the nature of creativity, dreams, or perhaps one day even consciousness. So that's why, with active collaboration with neuroscientists and AI researchers, like these two uh, researchers, they need to work together, because there's so much to learn from each other's fields, and only then can we march. And in fact, we are actually doing that. We are marching towards the future, these algorithms of the future. Quickly talking about computational neuroscience, which is one of my favorite disciplines of this whole modern neuroscience. um, Computational neuroscience is divided into three main types of models. There's no hard rule here. It's very flexible, but generally, these are the three ways where we can imagine computational neuroscience models as. First is the what model. Now, this is basically a descriptive model where it can be thought of as two things: encoding models or decoding models. The encoding models, what they do is they see how neurons respond to external stimuli. So they encode the information. Whereas the decoding one extracts information from neurons. And there's a model which is the mechanistic model, and that is basically it simulates the behavior of single or network of neurons, like how are these single and network of neurons really working. And then there's Y model, which is normative model, or inference model, where the questions like why do brain circuits operate the way they do, or what is the computational principle underlying them. These are the questions we sort of ask when we are dealing with why models. And a mix of these what, how, and why models are used in the industries these days. Mainly, you can see what models or why models a lot, but how model not as much. But the knowledge of how models is also very important. So let me now actually take you through few things that the industries now around us at this moment. What are they doing in this field? First, let me talk about David Eagleman, who is a Stanford professor and a researcher. He has his own lab over there, and he has a very nice TED talk also. So I would really, really recommend you find his TED talk and watch it, because he explains how neuroplasticity, that is in our brain, the neurons that we have in our brain, it's very plastic. Like it's very. I mean, the connections can be broken and new connections are made. We can make it learn new things that we even never imagined. So all of this is possible. And from there he actually developed this particular product called neo sensory. And what it does is that like you can see there's a wrist watch, a wristband sort of thing. And when you wear it, especially this is for the people with hearing problems. So they wear this wristband, and it takes about 2 3 days for them to get trained with this particular wristband. And what it does is, uh, let's say the different words that they are hearing, right, that will be translated into some type of a vibration. So every word will be corresponding to a different kind of a vibration pattern on your skin. So it's a touch or somatosensory cortex gets activated here. So that is happening. And with 2 3 days of training with this particular band, you will be able to identify different types of vibration. Like you can discern different kind of vibrations, like, and you can use that vibration to actually understand what is the kind of words that are spoken around you. So this actually very clearly demonstrates the idea of neuroplasticity. Like we are not born with, or we are not all of us are not skilled to understand the difference in vibrations, right? But we can learn it. And when we learn that, we can actually use it to do different things. Like in case of deaf people, vibrations instead of other very expensive tools, right? So that is this whole idea that David Eagleman is doing, which is more around the sort of what models. It's try to decode the neural patterns and replicate it and all of that. So there's this other company called Neurons Inc. It's what it does is it has this. They have built their own sort of an EEG headset kind of a thing, with along with eye tracking. And when people wear it, and they're shown some sort of an image, or they're just walking on in a shopping aisle, or in a shopping mall or somewhere. So but these readings are constantly being recorded, and you can interpret this reading and understand where is this person really focusing on, what in his visual field is grabbing the attention. And is that attention like an approach or an avoidance, or what is happening. So there are few things that you can understand by interpreting this data from the headset. So it's mainly used in scenarios for ad testing, where people show these ads, and you can see, okay, if this ad is really grabbing the attention or not. So a lot of companies do use these kind of ad testing tools. Um, then there is Neuralink, which is like the Fitbit for the skull, where Elon Musk and his team, they have developed this coin-sized chip, and that is implanted in the brain, in the skull, and that will read the brain activities from there, and you can see your brain activities on the screen or in the app or somewhere, right? So that will accurately predict, like the brain activities that are read are trained also to predict your different kind of motor actions that you're taking or things like that. So it's saying, or it's claiming that they are going to at the moment they are reading the brain activities, but it's claiming that you can also they'll also be developing tech to stimulate activity, and that will help solve Parkinson's disease and other such diseases as well. And also they're telling that you can use your brain signals, or you can train your brain to control a mouse or some other tools around you, like electronic Bluetooth connected tools and all of that. So next level of IoT. And so, talking about the stimulation, right? I would actually like to highlight this StimVeda Neuroscience. They are actually two of my friends who have started this startup, StimVeda Neuroscience. It's based out of Gurgaon, and they are using transcranial direct current stimulation (TDCS). That's what they're using. And that restores normal brain activity in depression, and it's a non-invasive technology. So it's like a simple sort of they have this ease called like a band, it's called ease. And from there the stimulations can actually help you elevate your mental illness in a way. So that's there. And then there is deep mind, which is more in the why sort of model, which is normative model, understanding why the brain is really doing this. So they have this AlphaGo, right? There is this Netflix documentary also on AlphaGo, how they developed it. And it is the computer thing that they developed, the algorithm that also defeated Lee Sedol, who is the champion of this game called Go. And it's all based on reinforcement learning, and they have developed this reinforcement learning algorithm and made it better by understanding how really the brain must be doing it. So I'm actually towards the end of my talk, and here I'm leaving you with some resources that you can do to start today if you're interested in this field. There is this computational neuroscience summer school. I had myself done the summer school last year, free for students, and it's organized by Neuromatch. The deadline for the summer school is approaching. It's April 20th. So if you're interested, enroll, and you can. It's a 3 week summer school. So that's one thing. There's also a computational neuroscience Coursera course by University of Washington. These two say they are very beginner friendly or very easy to understand or something, but give it some time. Take one topic at a time, and you will be able to understand. You don't need to know everything. Just see what you're interested in and go in depth of that. Then there is, if you want to know a little bit more about the brain, the biology of it, because it's very important to you that you know that you can just like it's good to be aware of the different um, parts of the brain and things like that, because that really helps when you also build the computational models. So I found this Khan Academy lectures very useful for that. Then a few book recommendations also, because highly recommend that you read a lot of books. You understand a lot of things, and it's an interdisciplinary field. And when you read a book, you connect different ideas and all of that. So to start with, Phantoms in the Brain, which I already had highlighted before, read that book. There are a lot of books that David Eagleman has also written. There's this book called Live Wired. It's a nice book. Even Models of the Mind is one of my favorite books. There's this Deep Learning Revolution by Terence Sejnowski. That is also a really nice book. So you can start with this. At the same time, you can also follow different researchers in this field. So UCL, University College London, they have a really strong network of researchers in this field. So look at their work. Even DeepMind is actually based out of that university. Even MIT, they have this Brains, Minds, Machines group, and they have this McGowan Institute over there. Amazing researchers there. Look at their work. Even Bernstein Center for Computational Neuroscience, BCCN, in Germany. There are a lot of researchers, and they have annual conference also. So go and check them out as well. So these are the different avenues through which you can get started into this field. And one essential element here is the curiosity. You need to be first curious about how brain is really doing different things, and also be interested in developing the AI algorithms, right? So, yeah, with that, I'm towards the end of my talk. You can follow me in these two places. I will share what do I learn and interesting articles in these social media.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a wonderful insight into the world of neuro AI. We can begin with the Q&A session now. I will read out the first question.
Yeah. There was no disturbance in the presentation after that, right? It was
No,
all
no,
smooth. Yeah.
it was very
Okay.
smooth. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So the first question is, what are the current unmet needs in neuroscience?
Neurosurgery,
Yeah,
right? What are the current unmet needs in neurosurgery?
yes.
Um, I'll be honest. I'm not very much so in the neuroscience and AI. I'm more inclined towards the AI part. I am not very aware of the bio or neurosurgery part. I'm sure there are a lot of unmet needs, but I'm not the right person to answer that at the moment.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Moving on to the next question. Give me a minute. So the next question is, what are the future neurotechnological challenges in brain-computer interfaces or brain-machine interfaces, and what implementations exist now?
All right. So this is a good question. Technological challenges. One is it's expensive. It's not very, it's not consumer friendly. It is still at the research labs level. So it's expensive. And so there are a lot of researches there people are doing to develop it and make it more friendly for consumers as well. And then other challenges is that um, not all can really like you need an expertise. You need to be like brain. See, like I told you, the readings that are coming from the brain, it's all an approximation. So you need to be aware of that. It's not an exact reading. So even a small error can misplace the entire experiment to some other direction as well. Like the small errors can actually become huge error ultimately. So you need to be aware of these limitations that these tools are bringing.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for answering that. Moving on to the next question. What are the best and least invasive methods or materials for reading the raw electrical signals of the nervous system?
The best and the least invasive is EEG, and that's it. Like that's the easiest one to do that. Like fMRI and all of that is not like it's in the hospitals and all that. Right? It's not very accessible. So EEG is the best one. So there are these two brands which actually sell the EEG headsets. If your lab does not have one, you can ask your lab to get that for you. There's Enobio and there's this Emotive. So these are the two very popular brands.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Moving on to the next question. Could you explain the normative model, please? Normative model.
Yes. Yeah, that is a good question. In fact, I myself took some time to understand that when I was really into this field. Normative model, like it's basically trying to understand. It's one of the toughest one to really understand. Like there's what, why, how, and why, right? So um, why? So like for example, in reinforcement learning, the way like the Pavlovian dog experiment that I had shared, right? They're trying different experiments and trying to understand how like why is it happening like this, like why is the dog salivating when the bell is ringing now after so many trials. So these are the questions that they're trying to understand. Like it's trying to infer from the experiments that is being performed, and these inferences help build the AI algorithms at an algorithmic level. So there's this Mars three laws, computational level, algorithmic level, and there's this I think implementation level. So we are talking about algorithmic level over here, and it's basically just keep asking why questions. Um, and also let me just tell this what, how, and why. These are not very discrete. It's like there is overlap over here as well, but it just helps you to segregate different sort of things in your mind, that what is the direction that you want to do. Like if you're taking a project, what are the different kinds of questions that you should ask, and how to what to do. Like very clearly, Y model example is a reinforcement learning.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for answering that. Moving on to the next question. Which are the best unsupervised methods to analyze very large scale real time neuronal data today?
Unsupervised methods to analyze very large. So um, there are some research happening in unsupervised learning. It's like it's still hard in understand neuronal data. Like there are other data where clustering and all these algorithms are used. So here also people can use clustering algorithm, where oh yeah, actually in my project, my also we had used clustering algorithms. So we try to find the patterns which are similar and they were clustered, and then we try to backtrace, okay, if these are all in the same category, what why are they so. So but analyzing it very large scale, real time is definitely a challenge. I think I don't think there's a lot of research, solid research that has been there done there, or I'm not aware of it yet. That's a good question. I will also explore myself.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for answering that. Moving on to the next question. What are the best and
What are the best and least invasive, yeah,
methods or materials for reading the raw electrical signals of the nervous
methods
system?
or materials for reading raw electrons? I think this question we took already.
Okay, ma'am. We'll move on to the
I,
next question.
yeah,
How might we use artificial intelligence to help develop an objective measure of stress? That's the question.
objective measure of stress. Great question. So I'll tell you what I did in my project. So this is again, my project was relevant to stress itself. What I was doing was we took the experiments that we designed, right? So we induced a little bit of stress in the subject first and recorded the brain activities, and then we played some nice relaxing music and then recorded the brain activities. So and by inducing stress, what I meant, what we did was we had some mathematical problems to for them to solve. So that was in like they were focusing, and they're in a stressful state at that moment, compared to listening to a nice relaxing music. So get now we have readings from both these different scenarios. Now what is left for us is obviously to pre-process data and all of that. After that, you build an AI algorithm which can differentiate the patterns in these two data and measure the level of stress or relaxation. So here is where you can use algorithms like SVM, support vector machine, and things like that, and develop the degree of stress that can be like you can have a sort of a scale that okay, this is a maximum stress, and after listening to the music, or this particular music is not really reducing the stress as much, and things like that.
Okay, all right, ma'am. Thank you so much for answering that. Moving on to the next question. Could you tell about any EEG emulators development
Hmm.
libraries which we can use for creating projects in college?
Yes. So yeah.
Yeah.
For EEG, like when I had done that project, we were using MATLAB, and for MATLAB there is this library called EEG Lab. So it's a really good library. It has a lot of different things inbuilt in that. You can use that. But if you're more Python inclined, then at that time the libraries in Pythons were not that developed. But now that I'm seeing, like recent times, even Python has caught up to the speed, and it also has EEG Lab libraries in Python, which you can use to work with EEG data sets.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for answering that. Moving on to the next question. What are the pros, cons, and ethical implications of bringing
Yeah.
the benefits? neurotechnology to everyone, including not just patients but also healthy individuals.
That's actually the most debated question among all the researchers and everywhere, right? So ethical implication of bringing the benefits neurotechnology to everyone, including not just patients, right? So the thing is, first of all, it should not be misused. Like, brain is so personal, it's so personal that we can't really let anyone read the brain data and misuse it, right? So that's one of the ethical implication. So but the uh, but at the same time, there are benefits as well. Like, for example, there are a lot of companies who are trying to develop these headset or some non-invasive tech which can help you do things like focus better, or because you can stimulate externally and to help you in, it will help you in focusing better or relieving your depression and things like that. So there are definitely benefits, but it needs to be carefully used. And you need to also know, like, I mean, you can't misuse it because, again, the brain is very personal.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for answering that. Moving on to the next question. Which are the best?
Which are the best
Okay,
yeah,
I guess this is done.
I think we took this question already.
Yeah, yeah. Moving. Okay. All right,
Yeah.
ma'am. Moving on to the next question. Mm, okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. We have reached the culmination of today's workshop. It was a fun Q&A session. Due to the time constraint, we won't be able to take any further question. Apologies on our behalf. And once again, I would like to thank you for your time and knowledge. This was really a good learning experience. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Kashish. I'm not able to hear you. I hope you all are able to hear me. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. We are able to.
So yeah, it was great. Thank you for inviting me for this quantum series talk here. All right.
Yes,
It was nice. I hope you learned something and at least know, like, got excited about this whole field and you can explore on your own. So,
definitely,
if
ma'am.
that is done, my job is done. If I
Definitely.
was just able
Good
to
session.
spark that excitement in you, I'll be happy.
Yes, definitely, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Same.